You know, we've all at one time or another looked back on life and said, what's the point? Hi, I'm Pastor Bill with your Maple Minute for Thursday, December the 31st, 2020. This is the last day of 2020. Almost feel like we should have a party, and probably some of you are. Hey, you know, though, you look back on 2020 and you're going to ask the same question I just asked. What's the point of all of it? Why do I even bother? I feel like for every one step forward, I take 3 steps back. You know, that really is part of Solomon's predicament as we continue in our studies in the book of Ecclesiastes when we look for that search for the meaning of life or what is the purpose in all that we do. Solomon, as he looks forward in the next couple of verses in chapter 3 of Ecclesiastes, he asks this question. In fact, in verse number 9 and 10, he says, "What gain has the worker from his toil?" What's the point? That's sort of what, as a teacher, I used to get students asking me from time to time. What's the purpose? Why do we have to do this stuff? Why do we have to learn foreign languages? Why do we have to learn trigonometry and calculus and all this algebra? Why? Because he goes on to say in verse 10, "I have seen the business that God has given the children of man to be busy with." And it's almost like busy work. I know as a teacher, sometimes if I had to be out of the classroom and I had a substitute, I would leave busy work, which wasn't fun for the students. It really wasn't fun for me either as a teacher. I felt like it was a waste of time. And that may be the futility that Solomon's expressing here as he asks that question. What's the use? What's the point? In the next verse, though, one verse simply, verse number 11, Solomon faces the attitude of futility and despair, and he gives us 3 answers to ponder when he talks about God and who has given us all this stuff to do. In the first aspect, he tells us that God's plan is good. In verse number 11, the first part of it, he says this. He says, "He, that is God, has made everything beautiful in its time." You know, our work sometimes, or the things we do, I should say that, the busyness of life can obscure the true meaning of life unless we stop to take a very close look. You know, when we take a good look at what life's really all about, then we realize that God's plan is good. You know, if we allow the meaning of this one statement that God made everything beautiful at this time to sink in, it's hard sometimes, but really, even in some of the hardships of our life, God's beauty is declared. See, we realize that everything really is beautiful in God's sight. Think about some of you who've gone through people passing away this last year, and it's been hard on you, and it's really ripped your heart out, and emotionally it's been tough. But really, what Solomon says that everything's beautiful in its time, what God's trying to get us to understand is there's a purpose. His plan is good. See, life isn't empty and random and godless, but full and precisely aligned and God ordained. It's something that even the difficult situations that we don't like, we can't sometimes fathom that our good Father would give us something that's hard. But our challenge, though, in life is to recognize that everything, as we talked about last time, has a time, a season, a reason. And to trust God, that's what we should do. We should trust God to bring sense and unity on His schedule, not ours. See, it's the perspective of our life, how we view things, that will color your life completely and thoroughly. And if you have a good perspective, things will be able to move in the right direction. It is a statement I liked, and I think we ought to say it more often. Faith should kick in when the roof falls in. And that's really the truth. And see, God sometimes lets the roof of our lives fall in because He's letting faith kick in for us. So if you've gone through some tough times like we all have in 2020, as you look forward to this next year, don't just ask for something that's easy. Ask for something that God wants to make in your life happen. The second aspect He teaches us when we ask that question, what's the point, what's the use, why do I even bother, is found in the second statement. God's purpose is clear. Not only is it good, His plan good, but His purpose is clear. In the middle of that verse it says, also, He has put eternity in man's heart. Do you realize there will always be a longing within us for something more than we have experienced until we know God personally? And God has drawn us. You haven't sought after God. God's drawn you to Him. And that's the whole idea. See, the unrest we see in our world and in the hearts, and sometimes even our own hearts, but the hearts of people today tells us that this world has not found rest in completely in God. and we won't until we are completely in the presence of God. See, the ultimate satisfaction of life is not found just in the attainment of heaven. It's in the blessing of heaven that I keep telling you about. It's in the immediate presence of God in our life, day to day. You see, in this day, we have a general presence, but we can't walk hand in hand with God like Adam and Eve did in the garden. One day, though, in heaven we'll do that, and that's what the purpose of God is. He says he put it in man's heart, and yet we find ourselves struggling because we want something now that we can't have because of our sinful attitude, sinful nature. The world is struggling because of the choices that Adam and Eve made back in the Garden of Eden, the same choices that you and I make on a daily basis to reject God for something else. It's why our churches aren't full on Sundays, is because we reject God because we'd rather have something else, something that we feel is more important. The third aspect that he tells us and helps us with in this question of what's the point, why do I even bother, is the fact that God's program is mysterious. He says in the third aspect of this verse as he finishes it out, he says, yet so that he cannot find out, that is, man cannot find out what God has done from beginning to end. It's true. Life is a mystery. And the only one who knows what really is going to happen in 2021, the only one who knew what was coming in 2020, because we didn't. In fact, I find it comical when you look at some of the things that the health department and that medical professionals thought. They keep changing their mind about how to deal with things, and they've got everybody in a panic because everybody has an opinion, but nobody has the answer. That's the truth, except for God. See, God's ways are mysterious. They're not our ways. We can't think like God. And even the Bible asks, who has the mind of God? That's the truth. The old preacher Vance Havner, he used to say this. He said, God writes over some of our days, we'll explain later. I think that's a really accurate statement that we should really write down maybe and keep in our view over what happened in 2020. You know, when life hands us situations that we cannot understand, we have one of two choices, basically. We can wallow in misery, which a lot of us did throughout 2020, separated from God too, by the way, because that's what it does. Or we can tell God, I need you and your presence in my life more than I need understanding. See, we've all sought for understanding at times when bad things happen, but God doesn't always give us understanding. He gives us his presence. What we should say is, I choose you, God. I choose you, Lord. I trust you to give me understanding and an answer to all my whys, to all the things that I don't understand, only if and when you choose. Now, we can say that. That's going to be tough, because that means we're going to have to go through circumstances that we won't understand. But you know what? Our God is a good God. And his plan is good, his purpose is clear, his program, though, is mysterious. And you know, it helps us if we just trust him. Faith is that building block. Remember, your faith kicks in when the roof falls in, and that can be tough. 2020 proved it. So as you look to the new year, as you're thinking about resolutions and goals, and I hope you are, I hope you make plans to think about God and a relationship with him even more. I'm not talking about a casual reading of the Bible. I'm not talking about just an attendance to church. I'm talking about making a deeper, deeper commitment to knowing him and pursuing his kingdom agenda, his kingdom culture in your life. Why don't you let it start, as this is the last day of 2020, why don't you let it start and make a promise to yourself that you're going to follow a closer relationship with God in 2021. Let's walk together closer with God and set some goals spiritually, physically, emotionally, and be ready, because God's going to do some mysterious things to us, for us, and with us in this next year. Look for his presence rather than understanding the why. I don't understand why sometimes, but I follow the who, and that's what I would encourage you to do.